welcome to the Robinson College induction video for the exercise areas. My name is Josh and I'm going to be running you through the two exercise areas we have today, both of which are going to be accessible via your key card. So when you finish this induction video and you've filled out your induction form, if you take that through to the Porter's Lodge and they'll be happy to update your key card, and then that will let you straight through to the exercise areas. Now, first thing to remember is as you are coming into the exercise areas, try and watch your head, and also there's a step, so just keep that in mind. Now, there is no music facilities in the areas themselves, so feel free to bring obviously your own headphones with you, but we want to try and keep noise levels down to a minimum, so obviously headphones would be ideal. I'm just going to run you through a little bit of a warm-up routine now. It can be quite handy to get this done, I mean, no matter even if you're coming in just to do a run on the treadmill or the rower, or even just do some squats, deadlifts, bench press, whatever you're doing, it's quite handy just to get a little bit of a warm-up in. So I'm going to run through 4 exercises. As a rule, if you could do maybe 30, 40 seconds and then just 1 or 2 rotations, just quite handy to get yourself warm. So first stop is just going to be a pass through with the band. So you can use any of the bands. Obviously, if they're not hanging on the wall here, they'll be on the room behind me. But what I'm looking for here is if you can, take your hands nice and wide on the bar. You can go feet together or apart here, that's personal preference. Then from here, I'm looking for elbows locked, and you're just going to rotate that planned front to back and back to front. Now, if you find it's getting to the stage where you're not necessarily feeling that stretch through your shoulders and it's not really tight, you can creep your hands closer together and that will just increase the tension. And you want to try and find that point where you've really got to fight to keep your elbows locked and rotate that band front to back. So that's going to be your first one. Second one is going to be a standard walkout. This is good for getting your hips fired up, ready for maybe squats or the treadmill or the rower. So you're going to start feet together, legs straight, and then from that position, come over. Naturally, you're going to be feeling that stretch through the back of your legs now anyway. Then you'll walk out, dip your hips, chest stays up nice and high, really try and focus on driving it up, and then you'll reset, back to the top, bum through and stand, and then 1 more rotation. So focus on that pause, bum behind you, then you'll walk out, dip your hips, chest stays up nice and high, and then you'll come back, stand and bum through. So that'll be the second one. Third one is going to be a spider lunge. So you'll come down, your back knee is supported, both hands to the floor. You can take your right foot up outside your hand, and the goal here is to try and get your right elbow down as low to the floor as you can, and this stretches through your hips, through your hamstrings, the back of your legs. And again, this is really good if you're planning to do any lower body work, so things like squats, lunges, anything like that. And then in your own time, you'll swap that over, go opposite foot up, and then again, drop that same elbow down, work on the stretch. You can always play around with the angle of your foot here, drive your knee in, drive your knee out, find those positions where it's tight, and then again, just swap it over in your own time. Just try and work it through, find those challenging positions. Then last one is going to be shoulder taps. This one out of all of them, the slower you can take this, the better. Try and take your feet a little bit wider than normal here. Give yourself a stable base. And then what you're looking for is left hand to right shoulder. You'll reset. Right hand to left shoulder, reset. Now, a regression for that one is to just take your knees to the floor and you'll do the same again. So you go left hand, right shoulder, right hand, left shoulder. And the goal is to try and keep your hips and shoulders as square as possible. Keep yourself nice and tight. And as a whole, those 4 exercises, fantastic. Get everything nice and warm, and then you can rotate it through. As I said, anywhere between 30, 40 seconds, maybe just the 1 or 2 rotations, and you're going to crack on. World's your oyster. Okay, so we're going to start with the treadmill today. Now, most important thing to remember on a treadmill, especially if you're not used to using a treadmill or you don't do a lot of running, you've got a safety clip at the bottom here. So you can unravel that and get that clipped up to the bottom of your t-shirt. So worst case scenario, if you were going at pace and you come too far back, it will flick the emergency stop and the belt will just stop for you there. So it's a little bit of a safety blanket if you're not necessarily used to running. So it's always a good option. Now, the most important thing outside of that is when you are on a treadmill, nice and simple, it's just a case of hitting quick start, and believe it or not, the belt will just start turning at a really slow speed. Now, when you are on a treadmill, you've got 2 options. On the left-hand side, you've got your incline or your gradient. So you can bump this up and obviously it will raise up the front of the machine, or you can bring it down and obviously it will lower it back down. Can be quite useful, so for instance it can mimic obviously walking on an incline or running up an incline. Second option is on the right hand side, and that's just going to be your speed. So believe it or not, as you bump that up, it will obviously increase the pace of the belt, and then vice versa on the way back down. Same idea. And then outside of that, when you're done, when you're happy, it's a case of just hitting the stop button on the right hand side, and when you've done, the belt will stop. It will completely reset. There's nothing you have to do. It will reset and it's ready for the next person to come along and use. Okay, so now we're going to go on to the rowing machine, the Concept 2. So after you've taken a seat, what you want to remember on this is you want to try and set up your foot straps so it's sitting just over the midline of your shoelace. So when you're in there, you can obviously get yourself strapped in. Want to make sure it's nice and tight here so it's sitting over the midline, and then from that position you can go through and grab the handles. Now as a rule, you've got your dampener setting at the end here, which mimics how much resistance you're going to have on the handle. As a rule, it's at 5 at the minute. That tends to be quite a good kind of starting position, and you can always take it up or take it down. Now, with a row, the most important thing to remember is you're going to try and split it into legs and arms, and then arms and legs, and that will give you a good stroke rate. So what I mean by that is your initial pull will be from your legs. You're keeping your heels on the pads and drive. So legs, arms, arms, legs, legs, arms, arms, legs. And then when you've got that rhythm, you can obviously speed that up a little bit, and you're focusing on that initial drive is coming from your heels, your chest is staying up nice and high, and you're really trying to focus on not rounding your shoulders and not coming into this position. You're keeping your chest up nice and high, legs, arms, arms, legs. And then again, when you're done with this, it's just a case of unclipping at the foot straps here, and you don't need to worry about doing anything with the screen. That will run you through and that'll be absolutely fine. That will completely reset. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a barbell back squat. So we're going to start with kind of racking the weight. So what I'm looking for here is when you grab the weight, obviously you want to try and use your knees here. So bend at the knee, drive up, and when you are up here, keep that weight close. Don't let it get too far out in front of you. From there, you'd lift it up, load it onto the bar. Now the benefit of the setup we've got here is it's not necessarily a free bar, it's on runners. So it's a lot safer, especially if you're quite new to lifting. What you've got is you've got the clips on either side of the bar here, and they're effectively just going to act as a safety barrier for when you're moving. Most important thing with a squat to remember is as you come under the bar, I want you to imagine you're pulling the bar down before you even disengage it. That's going to keep your weight locked in, keep you nice and strong. So squat is going to be primarily through your legs. You're going to come underneath the bar. As we've got the rotational clips, you're going to drive up and then rotate the bar back so the clips are disengaged. From there, you're going to set your feet shoulder width or just outside. Chest stays up, and you're going to sit down as deep into that squat as you can. Drive your knees out, stand and fire your bum through. So one more time, you're going to drive your knees out. Chest stays up nice and high, and squeeze your bum, and then when you're ready, you can rotate forwards, the clips will lock back into place, and then the bar is completely resting from that position there. Obviously, after every free weight exercise we do, when you're done, completely take all your weights back off the rack, put them back, and then it's ready for the next person to come along and use. Thank you. So now we're going to be moving on to a bench press. This is a really good upper body exercise for chest, shoulders, just generally upper body in general. It's quite good for strengthening your core as well. Now, most important thing with this is when you lie back on the bench, you want to try and adjust that bench. So as you're back, the bar, without you even touching it, is resting above your chest, probably about the lower portion of your chest. Now from that position, you're going to take, as a rule, your thumbs are just a gauge for where the grip ends. So use that as a width gauge, and then from there you can wrap around the bar, and that's quite a good position. Don't feel as though you've got to go this close. You can go a little bit wider if it's a bit more comfortable, but it purely just depends on your personal preference. So when you've found that strong grip position, make sure your feet are planted, And then from there, same as we did on the squat, you're gonna drive up, then you'll have to rotate so the clips are no longer engaged. From that position, you'll come down nice and low, try and make the contact with the chest, then elbows locked, try and make contact with the chest, elbows locked, and then when you've done your set, same as before, rotate back, load the clips, sit up and Bob's your uncle, bench press completed. So now we're going to be working through a seated row. So this is still going to be on the rack where we did the bench press and the squat, but it's going to be on the built-in cable attachment. So we've got 2 pins that we need to load up, same as the previous exercises. I've already got a 10 on this side, and I'll load up a 10 on the opposite side so it's even. Now when you've done that, we'll come round, back to your starting position. So as it's a seated row, we'll be sitting down, believe it or not. From that position there, we're going to plant our feet on the pad at the back here. And then from that position, you'll lean back to your starting position. So chest is up nice and high, shoulders are back. I want you to treat this similarly to how we were doing the rowing machine. So you're keeping your chest through and you're driving with your elbows. Knees, try and keep a slight bend. You don't want to completely lock out here. Then from that position, we pull, squeeze, reset. Chest stays through, pull, squeeze, reset. Last point to remember on this is as you're pulling back, I want you to imagine you're trying to squeeze a pencil between your shoulder blades. Really focus on that squeeze. We're back down. You can let that weight rest, relax, and that's your seated row done and dusted. So now we're going to be going on to a tricep push down. So this is going to be quite good for isolating the back of your arms. Now, before we run you through it, the 2 cable attachments at the side here are completely independent of themselves, but it's on the same pulley system as we use for the seated row. Now, you're going to be using the straight bar, which is usually hanging at the back just here. Now, from this position, you're just going to clip that into the carabiner at the top here. And as I said, this is all in the back of your arms. Now, the weights are loaded the same as they were for the seated row, so they're at the back on the 2 pins. Now from this position, your chest stays up nice and high. I want you to imagine you're having to tuck your elbows into your sides, giving it, looking like a T-Rex, I want you to imagine. From that position, chest stays high, you're gonna drive down, really try and focus on keeping your elbows locked at the bottom, and then you'll come up, notice elbows stay pinned, reset, drive. Come up, reset, drive. And I want you to really try and focus that you're not throwing that weight down, you're not using momentum, you're keeping your chest up nice and high, elbows are pinned, you drive, it's all in your arms, and then you reset to the top, relax, and that's your tricep push down. Perfect, so now we're gonna move on to a bicep curl. Now I want you to imagine this is effectively just the polar opposite of what we've just done. So you're gonna take the bar from the bottom, okay. So now we're going to move on to a bicep curl, effectively just the polar opposite of what we've just been doing. Instead of pulling down, you're pulling up here. So initially we're going to have to bring the cable to the bottom now. You can do that just by pulling the pin. You bring that all the way down to the bottom position, and now that's you set. Remember to load your weights, it's at the back, so same as the seated row and the tricep extension. From that position, you'll stand to the top. From there, similar, I want you to imagine you've got to keep those elbows pinned into your sides. You're going to have to naturally lean back slightly for a little bit of a counterbalance, but elbows stay pinned, you drive up, really focus on the squeeze. Notice that the elbows don't move a lot. You come down, elbow locked, and then you drive up, elbows stay pinned, come down, elbow locked, and then when you finish that last rep, you'll bring the plate down, reset, relax, and you're done. Right, so now we're going to go on to a cable crossover. So what I'm looking for here is it's just going to be an individual side. Make sure you've got the standard cable handle on here. Then from that position, you're going to step out. What you'll notice on this is you don't need to have a lot of weight loaded at all. For instance, here I've got nothing loading on the pins and you'll still feel engagement through your core. One of the best exercises you can do for core stability here and just tensing up and just working the whole area. Really good. So what you do is you'll have both hands on the handle. One locks over the top. Whichever way you do that is completely up to you. It doesn't matter which hand you have underneath. From there, you'll step out. Make sure your feet are shoulder width apart or just outside. And the most important thing with this is make sure your hips are braced. You're trying not to twist your core as you move it across your body. So you keep yourself locked, both hands on. You'll keep yourself tight and you pull across, pull across, pull across. Down here, notice that there's no twist or movement from my hips. It's staying locked. And then from there you come up and across, reset, back down, squeeze. Up and across, back down, squeeze. This is one of those exercises that the slower you take it, the slower you can take that transition, the more you'll get out of it. And obviously that will be the same on the opposite side, where you work through right, down. Cable crossover. Perfect, so now we're gonna run through pull-ups, which is a really good staple bodyweight exercise. Very good for core and your back. It's quite good at kind of helping for a good posture as well. It forces your chest through and shoulders are back. Now, good thing to look at with this is I know it can be quite a daunting exercise to start with, but there are some quite good kind of progressions to help build you up to a strong pull-up. Now, your easiest one, it is still quite tough, is it's gonna be hands on the bar. Now, before we start, you've got quite a few options in terms of your grips. The wider you go, naturally, the more of your back you're going to use. So it can be a case of the wider you go, the easier your pull-up will be. That's not always the case. It's a case of trying to have to play around with it. The more narrow your grip, the more it tends to sit through your arms as opposed to your back. But if you're not used to a pull-up, I'd recommend starting wide and then you can work in from there. But to a certain degree, it's personal preference. So your easiest progression on a pull-up, again, easiest, is gonna be jumping yourself to the top. You can obviously use a bench, and then the goal is to work on the negative. So as slow down possible, slow as possible. Ah, it was going so well. Just straight into it again?
No, just go with
just where we were?
Yeah.
Where we were, okay. Perfect. So you've got natural regressions on a pull-up. Naturally, we're gonna start with a negative. So one of the easiest variations to start with, you can use a bench, you can jump it straight up, but it's a case of playing around and finding that tough position. So a negative pull-up is where you'll use something to step yourself up. You can also jump up if you're comfortable. Find that grip that's comfortable for you. I know, again, comfortable being the operative word. From that position, your starting goal is to try and use the bench and start with your chin just above the bar. And then the aim is to lower yourself down as slow as you possibly can. The slower you can take that, the more control, the more strength you're gonna gain through your back. Try and get all the way to lockout, and then you can put your feet on the floor and relax. But the slower you take that negative, the more it's gonna help strengthen the muscle and the stronger your pull-up's gonna become. Obviously, as a rule, your hardest variation for a pull-up is just gonna be from standing, start, and then try and get your chin up and over the bar and go again. So I'll quickly run you through one of those. Obviously, we'll get rid of the bench. And for this one, again, find that position where you're comfortable with. The wider, the easier in theory. So from that position, your chest will always stay through. I want you to imagine you're pulling with your elbows, similar to how we were doing the seated row. I know it can be quite complicated, but there's a lot to remember. And then from that position, chest stays through. You're gonna try and aim and getting chin up and over the bar. You can come to the bottom to reset, chin up and over the bar, bottom to reset. But again, it's one of those movements that the slower you take it, the more you'll get out of it, and there's always a regression you can do to try and build up to that standard body weight pull-up. So the narrower your grip is, the more you're going to be using your arms, in essence. So if you take the narrower grips here, it's a little bit more of a bicep exercise, so it'll be using your arms a little bit more than your back. So this tends to be a little bit harder because you're using a smaller muscle. And then the wider you go, in theory, the easier it will become, especially if you're comfortable with a pull-up. So in close, in recap, is going to be mainly your arms, and then out wide, as I just demonstrated, is going to be more through your back. And that's your pull-ups. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going on to a barbell back squat. The exact same exercise as we did next door, but obviously now it's a free weight squat as opposed to using it on the power rack where it follows the runners. Now the benefit of doing it free weight is you've got to use significantly more core stability, as you can imagine, because it's not just tracking down the runners and back up. Using the power rack is fantastic for kind of slowly getting into weightlifting to start with, and then to build up to free weight is a good aim, as I said, purely because you can brace through the core and it can be just a little bit more beneficial. Now, so to start with, we've got 2 pins on either side of the bar, same as we were doing before. Next door, we'll obviously load that up, equal each side. And then what is different is 2 things. First of all, you want to get the clips on the sides. So the idea is obviously you'll squeeze that in so it opens up, and that will slide straight on the side of the bar. Same as we've done this side. Obviously that keeps the weights on nice and tight. And then the other thing that's different to next door is you've got your safety clips. So the idea here is these will slide in. Obviously this one's already set up. These will slide in. And the benefit of this is it means if you get so low on that squat that you're not 100% sure you're going to get out of it, you can obviously just take it to the bottom and it will completely rest and you can get out of the bar as opposed to you having to drop it off your back. So after that, it's pretty much exactly the same as we were doing next door. What you'll do is you'll step underneath the bar, make sure you've got that tension, so pull down, you'll step back, and then from that position, a chest stays up nice and high. I want you to imagine you're driving your knees out, deep squat, bum comes through at the top. You're working through the knees out, chest stays up, drive up and through. So one last demonstration. I'll show you if you need to use the safety feature. So again, what will happen, let's say you get to the bottom and you're thinking to yourself, I'm not going to get out of this. You can completely just go down, sit down, and it's completely safe. It's not going to go anywhere. And then that is your barbell back squat without the runners. Now we're going to be moving on to the last barbell exercise. Now this is a new one that we didn't do next door on the power rack. Realistically, this one can only really, or ideally, be performed from a free weight stance. If you do this one on a power rack, you can be it can force you into kind of some compromising positions, especially if you're not kind of very mobile through your legs. So I'd always recommend that if you are going to do deadlifts, which is what we're going to be running through here, always go free weight, even if it means you've got to start with just the bar. But it is a fantastic exercise for a baseline. It will work everything from your calves all the way up to your shoulders and everything in between. It's a fantastic exercise for work your whole body. So, really important thing with this, again, I know you've heard me say it a lot throughout this video, but it's chest through and shoulders back. Chest through, shoulders back. As long as you maintain that, it'll pull you back into a nice strong position and stop you from hunching forwards. So, feet are going to start underneath the bar. You're looking for feet shoulder width or just outside, and then your hands are much the same. You want to make sure that your hands are starting outside your knees, make sure they're not in front. So outside your knees, and then from that position, chest is through, shoulders are back, and I want you to imagine that you're driving your feet through the floor and you stand up with the bar, bum through. So one more time, chest is through, the barbell stays close, feet through the floor and stand. One more time, chest is through, feet through the floor and stand. And you find as long as you've got that chest through, shoulders back, everything else will come into a place. And remember, feet through the floor, and then that is your barbell deadlift. Okay, nice. So now we're going to move on to a dumbbell move. This is an overhead shoulder press. Really good for, similar to the bench press, but it's a little bit more of a focus to your shoulders as opposed to your chest. This one's going to be with a dumbbell in each arm, and the goal is to get those dumbbells directly overhead, elbows locked, and then you're back down to shoulder height, go again. The aim here is to try and keep it all through the shoulders so there's nothing from your legs. In terms of getting the weight off the floor, I want you to treat it similar to the deadlift. So you're focusing on keeping your chest through. From that position, keep it nice and strong, and then from there you can come up to the top, and then you feel free here, bum back and bum through to give yourself a little bit of momentum. That's absolutely fine. Just keep braced. Then from this position, feet are shoulder width, and I'm looking for a squeezed bum, elbows locked, and then you can reset down to the bottom, squeeze bum, elbows locked, reset down to the bottom, last time, squeeze bum, elbows locked, reset down to the bottom, and then down to the bottom is much the same. Slight bend at the knee, you can come down, plant, and rest. And that's your dumbbell overhead press. Very, very good for a core movement as well, that one. Nice, so now we're gonna run through one more shoulder exercise. This is called lateral raise. This is purely, completely shoulder isolatory now. Obviously, since you're standing, there's still gonna be a little bit more of core stability involved, but you're purely looking to isolate your shoulders here. Very good for promoting a good posture, similar to the deadlifts and quite a lot of exercises we've done today. So, this one you'll notice that the weights need to be significantly lighter because you're only working a really small muscle in your shoulders. Foot position, shoulder width or just outside. Just make sure you're comfortable for this one ideally. Now I'm looking for chest up nice and high, slight bend at your elbow, and you're going to be coming up for a pause, reset. Coming up for a pause, reset. And a big thing that you're looking for in this one is you don't want to use your hips to get the weight up. You're trying to keep chest up nice and high, slight bend at your elbow, and it's all through your shoulders. You raise, reset. You raise, reset. And again, as I said, try to avoid using any momentum when you're getting those weights up. And that's completely through your shoulders for a lateral raise. Okay, awesome. So now we're going to run through a couple of lower body exercises. First of which is going to be a lunge, dumbbell in each hand ideally. You can always hold one at chest height, but as a rule, try and go for a lighter weight in each hand from this position here. And we're going to be going for a forwards lunge. So chest stays up nice and high. I want you to imagine that you're driving that front foot out. If you can get your back knee to the floor, awesome. Otherwise, just take it as low as you can. This position, I want you to focus on loading your front foot. All the weight is through that front foot, and then you push yourself back to the top, reset, and then you'll swap it over. So you'll go left foot out, try and get your knee to the floor, load that front foot, and then you'll stand, bum through, and reset. This one, very, very good for loading up your legs. Again, it's kind of an alternative to the back squat, but you'll work single leg, take it from there. It's quite a good variation if you know you've got one leg that's stronger than the other, because it will force the weaker one to kind of catch up and strengthen around it. Second leg exercise we've got is just with the one dumbbell, and this is going to be a goblet squat. So you'll hold it up in a goblet position, believe it or not here. Take your feet a little bit wider, the same position that you'd naturally go for on a squat with a bar or we did next door. Your chest is looking to stay up nice and high. You're going to drive your knees out as we have been with the squats all day, and then bum through. So drive your knee out, chest stays up, bum through, drive your knees out, chest stays up, bum through. And then that's another good variation that you can incorporate for lower body to work through your legs instead of the back squat. And then you've also got the lunges as an option too. So just to finish off, I'm just going to run you through a few mobility drills. Now these are quite good. This first one, especially if you tend you're struggling with quite tight positions on your squat. So whether you're doing the squat on the rack in here or a goblet squat with the dumbbell or the barbell squat next door that we've run through. Now what you're looking for is, as I said at the time, you want to try and keep your knees out and your heels planted on the floor. If you find that as you're coming down, your heels are starting to creep up, obviously it's not going to be that exaggerated, but if they do start to lift up, one of the best mobility exercises you can go for here is plant your front foot. So for instance, here it's my right. I want you to try and drag your front knee over your toe. So the goal is you're trying to get that knee as far forwards over your toes as possible. You can use your spare hand to keep your heel on the floor, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to stretch that position and get used to your heel staying on the floor. And then from here, it's going to be different for everyone, but you want to play around with that angle. You can bring your knee out, bring your knee in, drive your knee forwards. Use as much weight as you're comfortable here, but in essence, you're just trying to get that knee used to moving forwards over your toes, and that will stop your heel coming up off the floor. If you give this kind of 2.5 minutes each side and then go back to your squat, I guarantee you, as a rule, it should feel a little bit more comfortable. You'll be able to sit a little bit deeper into it. Hopefully this helps. Now, going to an upper body movement, if, for instance, you're doing your bench press here, or you're doing the dumbbell overhead press as we demoed, this can be quite a good one just to help kind of try and ease it off through your back, ease it off through your shoulders. If you find as you're coming up overhead, it's really quite tight and you're having to arch your back, what you can do is grab one of the bands, fasten it up top wherever obviously possible, it doesn't have to be here. And the goal is you're gonna come back, and the goal is to try and let that band stretch you out. So your elbow will be locked or nearly locked, and you're looking to feel this stretch anywhere from behind your shoulder to the side of your back, into your lower back. From here, you can play around with the angle, come away from it, come towards it. You'll just have to play around with this. It's not necessarily one size fits all, but try and find that position where you can get the stretch through the sides. You can obviously do the same on the other side. And then last one, if you want to work through the front of your shoulder, you'll keep it in the same position, but you'll come out in front, and this works through the front of your shoulder now as opposed to through the back. Again, you can rotate down, rotate up, but you're trying to find the position where you can feel it anywhere through the front of your shoulder, and it will be same on the left-hand side. And hopefully a combination of those will just help you get a little bit more comfortable with your squat, a little bit more comfortable with your overhead movements, and you should be ready to crack on. So thank you for watching the induction video. I hope you found this helpful. And again, one of the last things to remember, really try and focus, keep your core braced when you're doing anything with a barbell.